Welcome to the only place where real, raw, and vulnerable conversations happen with IFBB Bikini Pros to give you an inside look at their struggles, strategies, mindset, passions, and all of life beyond the stage. This podcast is made to inspire, motivate, and remind competitors and the average gym goer that even the most extreme lifestyles and elite athletes have their ups and downs. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I'm your host, Celeste Rains-Turk, and now it's time for the Confessions of a Bikini Pro podcast. Our guest today started her bodybuilding lifestyle in 2016. Prior to competing, she was a cross-country and track athlete, but when she fell in love with the sport of bodybuilding, she decided to start a prep in March of 2022. She won her first show in June of 2022 and then went on to earn her pro card only 6 months later after 2 regional shows and 1 national show where she placed 11th before going to nationals in December, where she won her pro card. She plans to make her pro debut this June, which I'm excited to chat with her about now that she has graduated with her bachelor's in political science literally yesterday. By the way, although this will come out well after the fact, but then she's going to go on to law school next year. So I'm super happy to welcome to the show, Mia Bartschi. How are you doing?
I'm so good, Celeste. How are you?
Awesome. I'm so happy to be talking with you and hitting record. I was so excited that you were excited to come on because that gets me amped. So appreciate you being here.
Yes, absolutely.
So, I got to ask if you have something you do or think about or a ritual right before your heel hits the stage.
So, with my limited experience in competing, I don't have a formal ritual, but I actually have kind of like a little mantra structure. I don't even know if you'd call it a mantra that I use not only for just like competing, but I've used it before exams, like stressful events. And basically, the format of it is I am blank enough to do this. And so I just kind of repeat to myself, like, for example, for competing before stage, I would take some deep breaths and then just tell myself, like, I'm confident enough to do this. I'm strong enough to do this. I'm prepared enough to do this. And I just kind of fill in adjectives with whatever is going to be relevant to what I'm about to face. And the kind of rhythm and just repetition of those affirmations seems to really calm me down with deep breathing. So that's kind of been my ritual, I guess, so to speak, but it's not very formal.
Is that something you practice during your preps, whether that's while you're studying or prepping for a competition or any big event? Like, do you actually say affirmations going into those things?
Oh, for sure. For
Okay.
sure. I think um, affirmations can appear kind of silly when you first start them. You can feel a little bit, goofy saying to yourself those things, but after a while, our brains are so malleable. The more you tell yourself that you're capable or that you're confident in something or that you're strong, all of these things, you eventually embody that. So I really do believe that affirmations work.
Yeah, absolutely. I could not agree more. And it's such a great way of telling ourselves what we're capable of versus trying to perform well after berating yourself isn't going to go over very well.
Yeah, that's definitely something that I've learned throughout the last year of competing.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm excited to chat more about your journey because it was definitely a quicker road to pro, you could say. And we will get into that. And I want to just discuss straight away how this has really been impactful on your mental health, this entire journey. So, we're going to talk about a topic, you guys, that's never been discussed on the show, but is very important. It's very interesting. So, to listeners, we're going to be discussing self-harm. So, if you are uncomfortable with the topic, just fast forward a little bit. Plus, there are timestamps on www.celestial.fit/podcast. If you go to the category section and find Mia's name, you can actually identify the timestamp to when the discussion ends if you want to refer to when to do that. That way you don't have to worry about potentially hearing something you may not want to hear or you may be uncomfortable hearing. So Mia, you are one of the only IFBB bikini pros with visible self-harm scars. So can you talk to us about how you felt about the scars, getting on stage, and even just your overall outlook on bodybuilding's impact on your mental health?
Yeah, absolutely. So, this is something that I've never really addressed publicly, although it is like apparent when you look at my stage photos and stuff. Um, I struggled with self-harm a lot, from a very young age, and it actually kind of indirectly led to me finding training as an outlet for my mental health, and eventually led to me overcoming those self-harm issues. And it's something that I no longer struggle with. Um, you know, self-harm is a really sensitive and individualized behavior. I think um, every person that has experienced it, similar to like eating disorders, has a very unique relationship with the ways in which it, served them at that time in their life. Um, I was diagnosed with bipolar 2 at a very young age, and I think I internalized that as my identity, that I am just a person who struggles with this, and I am that struggle essentially. I had a psychiatrist actually tell me that I needed to start going to the gym or doing something physical, as kind of an outlet outside of the self-harm, as an alternative to try to help me overcome that. And it sounds ridiculous now, but I hated the gym when I started. My dad would drop me off at the gym and I would literally go sit. There was like this cardio cinema area, and I would go sit there on my phone for an hour until he would come pick me up. Like I just refused. I thought it was dumb. I didn't want to touch the weights, nothing. And after a while, I realized like I'm wasting an hour here every other day, or however many times a week I was going. I was like, I should just try it. And I became obsessed with it so quickly. It's literally like my purpose just fell into my lap. Which it's just funny to look back now and like think of how much I tried to avoid it. Um, but I had this mentality. It was just very dark, and I was I quite literally wanted to destroy my body. And then I found training, and I started just genuinely having fun in the gym, finding confidence, finding this identity outside of the things that I was struggling with. And my whole life changed from destroying my body to building my body. And so now that is my purpose moving forward. And it was actually quite a concern when I started competing. Um, I was exposed to kind of the basics of the competition world, but when I started competing last March, like I didn't even know what a front pose was. I
Wow.
I was so clueless. And so I literally started from ground zero. And when I was consulting with coaches, trying to find the right fit for me, and I met Kimoto, one of my first questions to him was, I have these scars. Is this going to affect like my placing? Is this going to affect how the judges perceive me? And he immediately was like, no. Women have stretch marks, people have tattoos, people have, different skin conditions. That's not what they're judging. Um, and at the end of the day, all of those marks, you know, like just imperfections, they're all part of our story. They're all part of what makes our bodies unique. And I think that if we are able to look at it in the right way, you can really leverage that as strength. I
That's a
think that answers your question.
Oh, yeah, that was beautiful. That was a really beautiful reflection, and amazing of you to be coming on here to talk about it for the first time publicly, as I expressed before we started recording. But I just want to re-acknowledge that it definitely takes courage, because as much as it sounds like you've really come to that place where you see the scars as strength, it's still like a big deal to address those things. And I think it's awesome that you are, especially because it's going to make a positive impact on others, which you've already expressed to me that that has happened. So what have you actually kind of found or maybe fostered within yourself by seeing the impact, getting on stage and going for it has had on others, even with the scars?
I have been really lucky in that some amateur competitors have reached out to me since I earned my pro card last December, and expressed that they had never seen a pro with visible scars or as apparent self-harm scars as I had, and that it showed them that they can turn pro with some of these marks. And, you know, this is something that's on my body permanently. It's a part of my story. Um, but I think it's just a testament to that you can change the story. Just because you may have gone through things or experienced negative things, you do not have to make that your identity per se. Like you can change the story and make it one of overcoming and strength. And um so much of our performance on stage is about confidence. It's not even about the actual physical qualities of your physique, although all of that is so important. But we know, like with posing and presentation, there's so much that you bring to the stage that isn't just the physical qualities of your body. I mean, it's your personality. And so using and leveraging your story on stage as strength, um, it's just, I mean, competing gives us a platform to share all of the ways in which we've overcome things.
I really love that perspective, especially the aspect about how you can change your view on yourself or your identity. And something that's really common is actually almost over identifying, you could say, with a diagnosis. And I personally saw this a lot working in a counseling center when I was doing my internship there, actually. And we had to be careful about how we utilize diagnoses because we have to protect that it's not going to harm the client, right? And processing a diagnosis is sometimes difficult, especially if medication is required, because you gotta just understand it. And that psychoeducational piece really comes into play. So when you did get diagnosed with bipolar 2 and you were harming yourself, was this happening in conjunction with each other, or was it like you got diagnosed and because of that you felt like disconnected or you wanted to harm yourself?
So I was quite young when I was diagnosed. It did happen in conjunction. Originally, they kind of thought it was like more depression stuff. They went back and forth with different diagnoses. Mental health diagnoses are pretty um, hard to pinpoint sometimes. I'm sure you
Mhm.
know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Uh,
Don't really agree
and
with the DSM
yeah,
actually.
and I remember a sense of relief when I was diagnosed, but I also remember this just kind of overwhelming fear of this is it. This is who I'm going to be for the rest of my life. And instead of allowing that to be the story, I mean, this was no short journey. I was diagnosed, gosh, when I was 11 or 12, and I finally, I would say, made a significant turnaround my junior year of high school, sophomore year of high school. So it wasn't a short journey by any means. But I think especially being diagnosed at a young age where you're not quite sure of who you are, even really, you're still developing your interests, you're still developing your personality and trying to figure out who you are. It's very easy to just latch onto something like that and kind of force yourself into a box. Um, but I think a hallmark of my life has been just the notion that you can change the story.
Mm. Yeah, and you definitely have, which is amazing. It's like you've taken your story and used it to write a new one, or almost rewrite it and reinterpret it. And I think that's what life is often about. It's making meaning of everything. Like without meaning, what do we have? We just have something we went through and experienced, whatever, and then we chalk it up to, let's say, a set definition. But when we make our own meaning of something, it gives us like more purpose, more perspective. And a lot of the times we'll go through something and in that moment it means one thing. And then you fast forward 10, 15 years, even, maybe even 2 years, 1 year, it doesn't matter. And your perspective's different when you look back on it. So you make a new meaning of it. And for you, it sounds like you really did make new meaning for it. How important was that conversation with Kim, with your coach, leading into bodybuilding? Like, had he said, yes, it's going to matter, how do you think that would have affected you compared to where you're at now?
I think there was a part of me that was prepared for that answer to be a yes. Um, the reality is that, especially with something visual like that, people can automatically assume things, judge you based on things, but um, that is kind of just a part of my life that I have to accept. And how I feel about that has to come from inside me. And if I were to allow, if that answer were a yes, it would be my decision then to let that deter me or encourage me to compete all the same. Um, I think that, you know, that is my challenge, but someone else might have another thing that they think might stand in between them and the stage. And at the end of the day, it's just going to depend on how badly you want that goal, and what you're willing to do to overcome that. Because, I mean, there are so many things that have never been done before, but that doesn't mean they can't be done.
Peace with food without sacrificing your goals as a competitor, because you deserve to have successful preps, productive improvement seasons, and peace of mind year round. I decided to create a free 8-day food relationship coaching series a few years back that over 800 people have gone through. Because when your head is cluttered with thoughts of food, eating, guilt, you have a lot less energy to invest into the goals that you truly care about. So this free program was designed to help athletes like yourself develop a healthy relationship with food so you can have your most fulfilling and effective preps, improvement seasons, and lifestyle phases as well. This is an 8-day series that has a video every single day, a full workbook to guide you through every single video, and you can respond to the emails with the work you did and receive direct support and guidance from me personally, which is, of course, something I love to provide to the community. So you're not only going to discover your ideal relationship with food, but you'll also identify detrimental thought and behavior patterns. You'll overcome guilt and shame, so every decision can be made with intention and pride. We will use expectations and reinforcements to seamlessly manipulate your behavior around food to be more positive and aligned with that ideal relationship with food. We'll figure out why you're really craving what you are when you're sleep deep in another jar of peanut butter, or justifying that next cookie, or continuously eating endless bags of rice cakes, whatever it is for you. We'll become crystal clear on why you act, think, and live the way you do, so you can, of course, act, think, and live the way you want to. And we'll come up with some personal commitments that are rooted in positive psychology based on your current season. So this is a psychoeducational course. It is free to anyone and everyone. You can access it at www.celestial.fit/food series and learn more about it, as well as even get a sneak peek into the accessible PDF notebook with the extra resources and guidance through every single workshop along the way. If you do decide to participate in it and you love it, of course, I encourage you to share it with a friend or a teammate or another athlete who may be struggling. Or if you hear about someone's struggle, let them know that this exists.
Absolutely. Yeah, that is very true and very empowering too. It's nice to know we can move through identities or move through things that we think will limit us. So It can be easy to get trapped, that's for sure. It can make us feel like we're doomed to that for the rest of our life, like you said. So, how did you personally change your story and create the identity you wanted for yourself to be the woman you want to be?
I mean, as cheesy as it sounds, bodybuilding really did save me. I started to train and just genuinely had so much fun in the gym. I've always been an athlete. That's always been a part of who I was. But training was something so like intimate and individual. It was like this hour of the day where I could just fully be myself and fully have fun, not think about some of these other outside things that were bothering me or that I was struggling with. It was almost like I could just put the world on pause and leave it all with the weights just for an hour.
Mm.
And I think that as I was putting all of this effort into building my body, it became counterintuitive to destroy it. Um, and so I found confidence and I found my sense of self and sense of purpose in proving to myself day after day, oh, I don't think I can lift that weight. And then I did. Um, achieving like small measurable goals, thinking, my training wasn't perfect. I was self-taught, so I really just went in and had fun. I would look up on YouTube and stuff, different workouts. I really didn't even know about competitors or competing. Most of the girls I followed were like kind of gym influencer girls.
Mhm.
And my workouts were definitely not like structured or optimal, but I had fun and I challenged myself every single day. And I think that from that, I developed a whole new identity and just sense that I could overcome challenges, which is something that I previously had a lot of limiting beliefs around. And so when you prove to yourself over and over and over again that you can overcome things that you don't think you can achieve, that's where confidence comes in.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Like it's proof for us that we can do the things we weren't sure that we could do. And we can experience a lot of doubt in this journey, but you just went in, you had fun, you transformed from destruction to uplifting, and you realized like it was counterintuitive to work against your body when you were working so hard for it. And I think that's a really beautiful perspective that you bring to it because it's almost like such a deep sense of gratitude for the sport and for the actions because of how it saved you. And it's like, who cares if my form wasn't perfect or I was self-taught? It was saving me in another way and it was helping me in another way.
Exactly. And I think that a lot of people are unhappy in the position that they are at, and they're that like disliking something or disliking where you're at can be a great driver and a great motivation. But I do think for longevity and to be successful in this sport, you have to love yourself and to change. Um, I don't think that, and we were kind of just touching on this actually before you hit record, but I don't think that picking yourself apart is ever going to take you to the success that you envision in this sport. I really truly believe that um, the success and the it factor that we all talk about on stage, that comes from a place of deep love and gratitude for our bodies and for what we've been through and what we've accomplished through preps and off seasons and all the parts in between.
Ooh, yeah, I really love that. Like you can actually embody and radiate the confidence on stage when you have come through a lot of those things and you've proven that to yourself and you've been able to transform your story. It's almost like you get to perform that evolution on stage.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly it.
So, when you got into this, you had a really fast journey, as we mentioned, but of course, you were living the lifestyle well before, and you were an athlete before too. So, I want to go to USA's where you placed 11th, and then you went from that to your pro card at Nationals. So, what was it that had to change, whether that was physically, mentally, life, to improve and earn your pro card?
This is a really interesting story because I didn't expect to earn my pro card as quickly as I did. And there's some really significant changes that I made after USA's, especially in my mindset towards competing, um, that I really think made the difference. Like I mentioned before, when I started competing in March, I started my first prep in March. I knew nothing about the sport. I didn't even know what a front pose was. The first check-ins I sent Kim are like laughable now because I'm like, oh my gosh, that's not even a correct front pose in the slightest. But it's a learning curve. I did my first show in Sacramento and I did extremely well. I got first in True Novice, Novice, and Open. I won the overalls in True Novice and Novice, and I missed the overall just by a hair in Open. And, I had gone into that show with such limited experience and such like a limited understanding of kind of what it took to get to the top in the sport that it was very unexpected. And I think because of that success, I'm definitely a person who puts a lot of pressure on myself. Um, it made me go into my first national show with just a lot of expectation, I guess is what I'll say. And I spent, and everyone tells you not to do this, but uh, it was a lesson learned. But I spent like, I would say the 3 or 4 weeks before the show, looking at girls who I knew would be in my class at nationals and seeing all the people posting, USA's 3 weeks out. And the reality is that I determined how I was going to do at that show before I ever got to Vegas. We talk about like the comparison game a lot in bikini and everything. And it was definitely a very hard lesson in focusing on your own paper. Um, it's not that I didn't, 11th at your first national show is still really good. I got second call outs. It was, I'd never dieted before I started competing in March. So this was all such a new experience to me. However, I put so much pressure on myself that, I did need a couple more months of dieting. We were still learning my body. This was my first time working with a coach, and, Kim is as incredible as it gets, but there's still a learning curve with every single athlete. So, I just wasn't there yet. And that's okay because, you know, the pro card, the first place, it's gonna be there. Um, the speed at which you get there is not the important part. So after USA's, I had taken the placing really, really hard. And that was a great lesson actually in not internalizing placings and not tying a placing to your worth because it's a subjective sport. A lot of it's about who shows up that day, how people show up. There's so many variables. And show day is just one tiny moment in this 16, 12, 14, 20 week experience where you've challenged yourself and overcome things. And it's almost silly to reduce it to just the opinion of a judge. As much as we value the opinions of judges, you have to, love the journey and love competing for all of that. The stage is just a cherry on top. But I remember on the drive home from Vegas, I was pretty devastated about how I had done because of all the pressure I put on myself. And I remember thinking to myself that, okay, whether I'm prepping for a pro show, if I get my pro card, or I'm prepping for an amateur show, another national show, the process is the same. Like the love and what I get to do every single day and, getting to pursue a goal that I am so passionate about, that's the same. Just because it's a different stage with a different name, or I have IFBB Pro in front of my name, it doesn't change the amount of work that I am going to put forward towards that goal. And kind of realizing that nothing was measurably going to change in that way kind of took all the pressure off. And I had an amazing talk with my coach, Kim, about not chasing titles. And, when we focus so much on the outcome or the expectations, we end up missing the entire journey. So my focus after that, when we agreed to keep pushing into NPC Nationals in Orlando at the end of the year, really just became focused on the journey, because I knew that whether or not I earned my pro card in December, I was still going to compete again. The process was going to be the same. I was going to love it the same. I was going to put my best foot forward the same. Everything would be just as fulfilling, whether or not there was a title in front of that. And so to earn the title in December was kind of validation that I am on the right track and I'm in the place I am meant to be. But I think that just a shift in focus from the outcome to the journey, and the focus on building a pro quality physique and embodying what it means to be a professional, is what propelled me to that pro card.
We hear that a lot, huh? Like, embody being professional, be a pro before you become a pro. What does being a pro mean to you now that you have achieved that status? Does it align with how you were acting to earn it?
I think that being a pro in this sport, it comes down to discipline. It comes down to being more focused on kind of the depths and day ins, outs of prep and improvement season than the stage. Because the reality is that at the pro level, one person wins. There's not, you don't deal with classes, you don't deal with novice classes, you don't deal with true novice. It's one girl that wins, and the majority of pros that step on stage are there to get feedback and improve. And if you don't genuinely love the process, it's a hard road. So I think that embodying like what it means to be a pro and living as a pro really means like being in it for the right reasons. It really means, we hear all the time people say like stick to your plan no matter what, but it's that discipline of, I don't feel like doing my cardio today, but we're going to do my cardio today no matter what. And kind of loving the consistency of that. I know for me, I am the best version of myself when I know that I am checking my boxes. And it doesn't mean that the boxes are always fun. It doesn't mean that I love my cardio every single day, but it means that staying consistent and disciplined in the long run is more important than some of the short-term gratifications or distractions that we might face in the immediate moment.
Oh, yes, absolutely. So did you find prior to embodying that mentality that little things would distract you, such as like the scrolling on socials for comparison, or were there other things too?
I definitely think that there's a learning curve. You know, comparison is something that we've all experienced at one point or another. And especially in a physique focused comparing sport, it can be extra heavy. But that is definitely something that I have strayed from in the past, and that I'm very actively avoid now. Also, it was my first time dieting ever, like properly. I had always been kind of aware of my nutrition, but really only on like a protein capacity before working with a coach. I had never taken nutrition seriously. I'd always eaten pretty healthy, but never, I mean, prep is not a weight loss program and it shouldn't be treated as one. It's very intense nutritionally. And so there was definitely learning curves there with managing food focus. But I think in the long run, we have to come at this from a place of love, and discipline has to come from a place of honoring your higher self and honoring the goals that you want to achieve.
Mm. Absolutely. And when you say honoring yourself, the image I kind of get is that follow through. It is doing those things that need to be done to get where you want to go. And part of that is having a plan and guidance and knowing that what you're doing is actually taking you there. So, what are some of the things that you did to create that physique that needed to be created or to bring that pro level look to the stage?
The first thing that comes to mind is really trusting my coach and the people in my corner. As I got deeper into prep, I mean, I was in prep from March to December, so it was a very long season.
Mm-hmm.
And as you get deeper into it and as you get leaner, it becomes harder and harder to view yourself objectively. And at a certain point, Kim always says, don't think, just do. And I always come back to that because at a certain point, you have no idea what you look like. I mean, honestly, like when you get that lean, and some people call it prep goggles, but it is very, very, very hard to look at yourself objectively. And there's always going to be those thoughts of doubt and thoughts that creep in of I'm not ready, or all of those things. But just being able to trust the people around you who are informed about the sport and the criteria, and who will put your health and mental health first and in your best interest. Ensuring that you have those kinds of people backing you up in your prep, I think, is crucial to making it to a top level. Because this is an individual sport, but it does take a village. And honestly, the relationships are probably the most fulfilling part. I can't even tell you how many incredible friends that this sport has brought me. So trusting your coach, and then also being willing to admit that there are things to improve on. You have to be willing to adapt. For example, I used to prep all my meals before USA's like in bulk. So I would like prep like a big bulk thing of sweet potatoes, a big bulk thing of my tilapia, a big bulk thing of chicken, and then every day I would like portion out my meals. Well, I found that, and this was before nationals, but I did mess up a couple times, like eating an extra ounce of chicken here and there, or some extra sweet potatoes when I wasn't supposed to. And so I had to reflect on my systems after USA's and realize that, I'm going to be more successful if I just prep each meal measured out as it's supposed to be eaten, and there won't be room for mistakes. So when we know that we're human, we make errors. When you're aware of those blind spots and you can change your systems so those blind spots cease to exist, you will be more successful.
Absolutely love how you said to evaluate your systems, and how when you really took a step back and you were honest with yourself about it, you came to see like, okay, this is not, I mean, it's not like it's a bad thing necessarily, but it's certainly not a good thing for where you were trying to go. And you had to change it so you could actually get there. And that speaks to you loving the ins and outs of it, being willing to adapt, and embodying just that next level mentality. Because if we're always doing the same thing, we're probably not going to end up leveling. I mean, there's a reason why we have to lift heavier in the gym or change our tempo or eat and change the way we eat or change the amount of cardio we do. Like we have to change things in order to elicit a new result. And I will also point out, and I could be wrong on this, or maybe it was stage lighting or photos or whatever, but I thought you changed your hair color too. And I was wondering if there was a reason for that.
Yeah, so I did change my hair color for my warm-up show before nationals, which was Sacramento after USA's and nationals. And that was actually Kim's idea. He suggested, we were looking back at my stage photos and we realized that my natural color actually ended up being pretty close to the tan. And a lot of your stage presentation is about contrast. So picking a suit color that contrasts well with your skin tone and the tan, picking a hair color also can play into that. And so he suggested that I dye my hair darker, not black, but like very, very, very dark brown. And as soon as I changed it, I realized how much more myself I felt actually. So now it's my look. But yeah, definitely changed the hair color. And we were significantly leaner coming into nationals than I was coming into USA's. I had completely underestimated the conditioning that's required at the national level. And we were determined to bring that come nationals. So,
wow. Yeah, that's awesome. I want to talk to you more about how you did that, but let's go back to the idea of contrast because I think this is important and very interesting too, because different stages can have different lighting, or your tan could end up looking different, or just your overall look could look different. Now, do you feel like you felt more yourself on stage because it brought out more of what you were looking for, or was it more so just like it was a different energy for you? Like, what was it that contrast ended up making you feel more like yourself?
well, I think that the look just felt more like me. And I think that, I mean, we've all experienced this when you feel like your makeup's really on point and your hair is really on point. Something about your day just, it's easier to fall into that most confident version of yourself. And so I think just personally being more satisfied with the way I looked reflected in my posing, in my stage presence, and in my energy on stage. That it factor really comes from inside of you and how you're feeling about yourself. And if your thoughts are all doubting yourself, all the makeup artist got it wrong, or I don't like the way my hair turned out, it reflects in your posing, it reflects in your energy. Um, and that goes back into like loving yourself is a requirement for longevity in the sport. Or at least being able to celebrate what makes you unique.
100%. What are some things that you do day to day that you feel help you to create that level of self-love required to improve and strive for more?
Routine is a huge one. For me, routine makes everything else fall into place. Sticking to my routine is when I feel the best. And the more consistent I am in the things that I know make me feel good, the more consistently I feel good about myself. When I'm making choices that I know align with my goals and my passions and who I am at my core. I mentioned earlier affirmations. I also am pretty careful about the content that I expose myself to online. So I really try to seek out content that, you know, teaches me about the sport, or you know, your podcast is a great example of like sharing stories about mental health and competing experiences and just positivity. I actually this kind of reminds me, but I used to play slug bug all the time with someone.
Wait,
And
what is
you,
slug bug?
you don't know what slug bug is?
I don't think I do.
So there's those like Volkswagen bug beetle cars.
Oh, yes.
And
When you
so
see yes,
yeah,
okay.
when you see one and you like punch the other person, you're like slug bug.
Yes,
Well,
okay.
most people play that as kids, and we had started playing that, as like adults. And as soon as we started playing it, I saw the slug bugs everywhere all of a sudden. It was like they came out of nowhere
Yeah.
and the streets were filled with them. And it's just like an example of what you look for, you will find. So if we are constantly looking for opportunities to celebrate small successes or opportunities to affirm ourselves or just positivity in general, you will find that and you will embody that. On the flip side of that coin, if you're constantly looking for things to compare yourself to, if you're constantly looking for negatives, if you're constantly kind of seeing the darker side of the situation, it's likely that it's going to feel very dark and that all you're going to see is the negativity. And so I definitely am a big believer in intentionally directing your focus onto the things you want to become.
Mhm. I absolutely appreciate this point so much because what we focus on does matter. And the reason we can start seeing those things more after we play a game like that is because we have our reticular activating system in our brain going, be on the lookout for this. Or it's kind of like if you start dating someone and they mention they like something, a color, you're going to see it so much, like you're just going to be thinking
Right.
about that. Or someone's like, oh, I love this type of dog. You're going to start noticing it more. And it's not just because, iPhone's listening and giving you like photos for it on your feed or whatever. It's because you're genuinely like seeking it out as well. Like in real life, you'll notice it. And so what you focus on does matter. And I absolutely love this point you're making about how you paid attention to your systems again. And one of the systems is what you're looking at, what you're thinking about, what you're educating yourself with, even what you're listening to. So you have like a lot of doubt, look at where there might be doubt in your life. You have a lot of negativity. Where else are you focusing on negativity? Or where can you focus more on the positivity? And you have a really cool story, Mia, because you have rewritten it for yourself. You've transformed your identity. You've created new versions of yourself. You started this sport without any idea how to even do a front pose. You fast forward and you're a pro. And now you're working towards your pro debut. So you said that you do feel like a lot of who you are as a pro was embodied leading into you actually becoming a pro. Now that you're preparing for your pro debut and you know that mentality is that only one person wins. There's no classes, there's no multiple opportunities to get on stage. It's that one shot. What is your focus, or what do you notice maybe is different in this prep as a pro versus when you're prepping as an amateur, if there is a difference?
So there's not actually a lot of difference in the mechanics of my prep, in terms of like how I'm approaching my training and dieting. It's with a very similar intensity. It's with a very similar love. But I would say that this prep, I have felt a lot less pressure, a lot more gratitude, and I've felt a lot more present. And I think it's because of a genuine recognition that I am living my dream. I get to wake up every single day and chase this goal that I am absolutely obsessed with. And it is just much more focused on the journey and the lifestyle and doing what it takes to build a hopefully Olympia qualifying worthy physique one day than it is about actually the outcome itself. And so I think that the pro status was just a tangible validation of my love for the sport and of my dedication and tenacity towards these goals.
That's a great way of looking at it too. Like, your reward happens every day because you're waking up pursuing what you love. The pro
Exactly.
card, the trophies, whatever is really the tangible, but it's not the be all end all because you're already rewarded day in and day out. Is that passion or obsession or that dream similar to how you feel about your future pursuits and career with law as well?
Reasons. I would say that competing and bodybuilding are what like sets my soul on fire in a way. Like this is what I wake up thinking about every single day. This is what I go to bed thinking about. And I love law and I love academics, and I'm an extremely driven and focused student. That's very important to me. Um, but I don't think I share the same level of excitement, if I'm honest,
Yeah.
for those things, even though I do genuinely enjoy those things. And it's something I am looking forward to spending my life invested in on a daily day-to-day basis. But I think that, and that's why bodybuilding is like my passion, hobby, lifestyle, because it is what makes me so genuinely happy. Um, and I think that it's important to have different interests in your life that fulfill those different parts of you, whether it be academics and sports, or some people are really into crafts or writing or whatever it may be. Um, it's just part of being like a well-rounded, more fulfilled individual.
Hmm. Why do you think that's important for life as an athlete to have those other things?
I definitely do believe in being selfish when it's time to be selfish about prep. I think that you can be selfish in a positive way and kind of have that tunnel vision, and that it can enhance the rest of your life. I know for me, like prepping during school actually enhanced my ability to focus because my time management skills became better. I was able to um, really set aside time when I knew I needed to set aside time for like academic endeavors in a way that I previously hadn't. But I think that academics or work versus athletics, it requires a different skill set, but they're very synergistic. So what we do in bodybuilding, the consistency, the day in and day out of, repetition, and maybe you don't love it every single day, but you still put your best foot forward. That's going to translate directly into your studies. That's going to translate into um, how you perform at work, or how you interact in your relationships. Relationships aren't always easy, but we have to make a conscious choice to continue to work on them and put our best foot forward in the most positive way possible. Um, and, sports and academics require the same. Studying's not always going to be easy, but we still have to make the choice to sit down every single day and um, give our best effort to focus and gather what we can from the material. So uh, while it may appear that studying political science and law requires completely different skills than what it would in the gym for bodybuilding, they actually end up going hand in hand, and they play off each other really well, and actually end up enhancing my experience in both realms.
I love how you connected the two by really saying like it's not always going to be easy, but you do need to do it and put your best effort into it because it still matters to you and it's still something you value and you want to prioritize. And I agree that it's important to have other things in your life that you focus on because I personally have found that by managing things like school, relationships, prep, or even improvement season all at once, as well as other hobbies, family, etc. Doing all those things at once actually kind of forces you to time block or make time or find ways to prioritize these things and you get into a really good groove, I find. Sometimes it can be a lot, and there are times in our life where it's overwhelming and we have to just push for that little bit, like say it's finals week or you're wrapping up a program, that kind of stuff. It can be more difficult, but it's worth it. And I love how you made that connection, because there's a lot of times when we just think, oh, this person's just into bodybuilding, they're just into competing. We don't get to hear out of all this. So I'm actually curious, outside of prep now, and now that you've graduated school, are you also still doing an internship? Are you working?
So I began my first prep last year in March, and I began this year's prep in March. So that was like kind of early spring semester. And it just so happens that both semesters that I prepped were my most aggressive academically. So not only was I taking the most amount of units that I've taken in undergrad, but I also had a virtual internship, and I worked on top of that for my first prep. And I did the same thing this year. So it's safe to say that I had a handful. But like you said, it does force you to be extremely vigilant about how you're spending your time, and just plan really well. I think that a lot of us overcomplicate things in prep, where it's just a couple hours a day that you need to take. Like for me, I know I have to do my cardio in the morning fasted. And it's not because fasted cardio is any better, or that, it is comparatively more effective than other forms of cardio. It's just that I know I get it done the strongest, the best when I do it fasted. And so knowing that about myself, I'm able to commit to, I always do my cardio in the morning. And then I block out the rest of my day accordingly. I work part-time in a couple different capacities. Now that I'm graduating, it'll be a little bit different going forward, but I am the director of the law clinic for my university. So I do nonprofit legal work. I work part-time actually at a catering company, which is pretty funny for a bodybuilder.
Yeah.
So on prep, definitely spend a considerable time around food, but that's never really bothered me. And then a research internship on top of 18 academic units. So
Wow.
definitely a juggling act, but when you genuinely love all of the things you're doing, it doesn't feel like a juggling act, I would say. I also think that being busier is a benefit in prep, especially because free time is nice, and you need time to recover, and you need to prioritize some downtime to recover for sure. But I know for me, too much downtime is a recipe for disaster. Keeping that structure, keeping busy, keeping your mind occupied, it definitely helps you get into that rhythm that you were just talking about. When we don't have any structure, and your only endeavor every single day is just your training or just your cardio, it can become really easy to get very food focused, very outcome focused. When we have multiple things to focus on and multiple things to put our energy into, it's a lot easier to just get into that flow state and just check your boxes off without much thought.
Yeah, I think getting out of autopilot mode as often as possible when having to follow such a structured routine is really important. It's like if you're in autopilot mode, you're kind of missing the experience of doing all the things you've wanted to do and really enjoying it. You mentioned it's important also to have the downtime, the rest, the restoration. So what do you do for yourself for those things?
Um, Definitely a big advocate for like Epsom salt baths. Think
Mm.
that's great. Um, I've definitely learned the importance of rest days. Early on in my training, rest days were something that I hated. I think mentally they are still a little bit challenging because the gym is where I have fun. It's the highlight of my day. It's what I look forward to every single day. And so sometimes not having that hour with the weights can be tough, but that's where you grow. Those rest days are where you're making progress actually because your body's recovering. So really prioritizing that on those rest days, getting off your feet a little bit, not overextending yourself. If you're feeling tired, trusting yourself enough to listen to that instinct. A lot of us, especially in the competition world, get very sucked into that like 24/7 grind, nonstop mentality. And that can be great and that can serve a purpose at times, but it can also just burn you out really quickly. And if something isn't sustainable, it's not going to be successful. So I think that, being able to know and trust yourself enough to know when to push hard, when to really be intense about whatever it is that you're doing, whether that's training or cardio. I'm very intentional about, okay, I have 45 minutes of cardio. I'm giving all I got for these 45 minutes and then I'm done. Being able to say, okay, I'm going to get off my feet now, or you know, I'm going to pull back a little bit for the rest of this day and allow myself to recover and not to continue to push yourself into the ground. Especially if you plan to do this for a long period of time, is a crucial skill to learn.
Ooh, yes. How do you know though that what you're doing is sustainable? Because I think sometimes we don't realize it until we can't sustain it. So how do you come to terms with like, yep, what I'm doing is something I can sustain, or I'm setting myself to sustain it?
Well, I think you're right. In that a lot of the times we don't realize it until we're kind of at that breaking point of, oh, this is no longer sustainable for me. And I think that can be challenging. But I also think that um, when you practice listening to your intuition and you practice trusting yourself, um, and you continue to lean into the things that make you feel like the best version of yourself, inevitably it will create a sustainable path. When you continue to make disciplined choices that and this really goes back to a competitor really deeply knowing their why and why they are in this sport and why they compete and why they choose to prep. But if you continue to make choices that align with that why, I think the natural conclusion of that is sustainability if you really are aligned with that.
I totally agree. Like your why, your values, the real internal factors behind what you do is important to continuously revisit. And like you said, having yourself set up to have rest time or recovery, like just making that part of your routine and being willing to evaluate your systems and set yourself up to prioritize those things that matter is all really insightful. And it sounds like bodybuilding has not just saved your life, but also really transformed maybe how you live it as well. And going from not knowing much about it at all to now being where you're at, you probably had to learn, I'm assuming, a lot through experience or through your community. So what what was it that actually got you to the point where you're like, oh, okay, now I know like what a front pose is? Like, were you studying? Was it mentorship? Was it just your coach? What was it that really got you to that point where you're like, now I get it?
I fell in love with the world of competing so quickly that I quite literally became a sponge. I listened to every podcast under the sun. I started going to shows that were nearby, like not even, really knowing anyone competing, but literally just to watch. Started meeting promoters, meeting people in the industry, reading about bodybuilding. I mean, asking my coach questions. A million things. Anywhere I could possibly get information from, I I was there. And I think a really beautiful part of this sport is that none of us are ever really done learning. There's no correct way to approach the sport. There's very individual, it's very unique. And our methods are going to continuously change from prep to prep, from season to season. And there's always more to learn. So I think, part of being a pro is recognizing that you are a student of the sport, and to perfect your craft, you need to continuously seek out information, talk to people, be willing to learn from people, especially those who have, I'm on the younger side of competitors. I'm 21. So, being willing to learn from girls who have been competing 5, 6, 7 years, or even more. I think that there's just so many opportunities for us to get better, not even just physique wise, but just in our perceptions of the sport and how we analyze the sport. I mean, I think to some degree we're all fans. I know when first call outs come out for other pro shows, I am always on the edge of Instagram checking NPC news, refreshing, waiting for that first call out. And, really trying to ask yourself, like, what are the judges seeing? What is it about this first call out that is different from the rest of the show? And trying to understand the criteria better. I just think there's a million opportunities as an amateur and a pro to continue to learn.
Absolutely. So true. And I'm gonna ask you one more question about bodybuilding before I kind of switch over to talk to you a little bit more about your passion with law. When it comes to the bodybuilding life, has it taught you anything that maybe came as a surprise and you didn't maybe expect to learn through the sport?
That's a really good question. I think that the sport taught me things or revealed things about myself that I was surprised about. I think that, I've always considered myself to be a person that I'm a very type A personality. I've always been like very dedicated to school and all of that kind of stuff. But I think I surprised myself with how deep I could dig for something. The levels to which I had to go to earn my pro card were depths that I don't think previously I would have been confident enough to face. And just the like recognition that success is the accumulation of winning every single day, and the ability to focus on just winning the day or the moment in front of you directly translates to achieving those big goals. I think that's the biggest lesson that bodybuilding has taught me. And that definitely, I think, surprised me from my mindset a few years ago, where maybe I assumed that achieving big goals meant extreme, kind of overly ambitious measures, like these big actions, when really it's the accumulation of consistent small actions that that really create that success.
Ooh, yeah, love that. It's so, so true. And now, can you share, you're doing some research internship right now for law and for a law office. You're about to pursue law school next. What inspired you to even enter this field?
I've always been pretty interested in the legal field and in political science. I was kind of lucky in that I just gravitated towards that. I've always been more of like an English social studies person. I'm not a math person. I don't like numbers. And I'm not the biggest fan of science either. But I've always really gravitated towards the legal field for some reason, and being able to navigate that world in a limited capacity and get some experience working with attorneys just kind of confirmed that to me. So I was lucky enough to just kind of fall into that, I guess.
Wow. I love that. You really followed your heart there.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, do you have a dream career within law that you want to go into or pursue?
I hope to practice in the civil or corporate field. I'm interested in judicial reform, but in terms of how I want to practice as an attorney, I think I'll shy away from criminal law and lean towards civil or corporate.
That's awesome. Very, very cool. Did you listen to Sophia's episode?
Yes.
Sophia, you did?
Yes.
I
Yeah.
was wondering. That's cool. I'm like, oh, we've now had like two passionate, loud people here.
And there's so many amazing pros that have demanding careers outside of the competing world. One of my good friends, Jessica Wilson, she's a veterinarian.
Yes,
There
yes.
are so many amazing, amazing women in the industry who also have full-time jobs or are, full-time moms, or like people have so much stuff going on outside of this sport. And so like with your whole notion of build more than just a body, I mean, it really is that.
Thank you for referencing that. Wow, you do your homework. You really know. Thank you. It's very true. There's a lot of women doing a lot that we don't always get to see. Like that was also a big reason for this podcast is I'm like, hello, who are these women who are so amazing? Like I know there's more to it, and it's just really awesome to hear the passion and the excitement and the pursuit of so many things in their life that make them great or that they want to be great in. And it's really inspiring, and it's nice to see that too, because you realize like you can do so much for your life, even more than you even think. And I'm pretty sure there's this saying that's like, we overestimate what we can do in a year and underestimate what we can do in 10 years. And I like that quote a lot because it reminds us that when we look back, we've actually accomplished quite a lot, sometimes more than we give ourselves credit for. And we can also like set ourselves up for success year after year by trusting that that vision is going to work itself out in what we put our mind to.
Right. Absolutely.
So you did just recently give some really good advice when you were talking about different lessons that came from this sport and also changing your identity. But I'm going to ask you what your best advice is for someone who has never competed before but would like to, and then your best advice for someone who's on their road to pro.
My best advice for someone that is going to compete for the first time, I would say, is just to be completely open to the experience. And a huge component of that is not putting expectations on yourself. It's not to determine whether or not you're ready. Just jump in, have fun. This, at the end of the day, we compete because it's a choice. And if you don't have fun, there's quite literally no point. If I look back at my fitness journey, the times where I've made the most progress are the times that I've had the most fun and just genuinely been in that flow rhythm state and enjoyed what I was doing. So I would encourage first timers, you only get your first show once. So soak it in, be present, and be open to the experience.
I love that.
And then for someone who is on their road to pro, I think I'll reiterate the amazing, amazing advice that my coach Kim gave me, which is don't chase titles, don't chase the outcome, don't chase the expectation. Focus on building a pro-worthy physique and embodying what it means to be a professional to you based on your why and your values, And, the title will come, those accolades will come, but the more we spend chasing them, it's usually counterproductive to our journey. So, focus on your now, focus on your why, and continue to just do the work day in and day out.
Love that. Such a great piece of advice, and a reminder of what you had mentioned earlier too, of like really just staying focused on loving this process rather than fixating on the outcome. So how can people connect with you and continue to follow your journey?
Absolutely. I mainly use Instagram, so it's just my first and last name. Pretty simple. And I'm not really on any other social media for the most part.
Awesome. Okay, so we'll make sure that's in the show notes page. And to everyone listening, that's always on celestial.fit/podcast. Again, you won't just see timestamps there or how to connect, but you're also going to get a full summary of the episode, as well as a bulleted list of the topics we covered. And there's something else, but I'm forgetting. So anyway, you can check that out. You can send your friends and teammates that link too, so they know what to expect. And thank you guys so much for always tuning in, listening, rating, reviewing, and most importantly, for reaching out to the athletes when they've come on or tagging them in your stories of you listening. I know it goes a long way for them, and it goes a long way for the show too. So I appreciate that. And Mia, thank you so much for coming on to the show.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. And I hope that you all have an amazing rest of your day, night, or morning, wherever you are in the world while you are listening to this episode. Just make it awesome.